Thank you for joining us. I'm grateful for you to be in Arizona. So my name is Pat Furlong, and I'm part of the team of PPMD. And I'm going to talk to you about tipping points and stories and a little bit of our history along the way, and maybe some very exciting news as well. If I can work this, then that would really be good. Help? Ryan Fisher is head of our advocacy and one of the three people that works with me with Callender. So Ryan, Callender, and I lead this organization. And you can see that he always gives directions. Okay. So as we were planning this conference and as I was thinking about it in the last days, just before we came to Arizona, I was really worried. Worried about the family getting together, worried about the vulnerability of the boys we care so much about and the women we care so much about and our families that we care so much about. So I was really stressed about it, and I was driving along in my car thinking, is this going to work, and are we all going to have COVID at the end of the day, and are we going to be happy together, and it's been so long, will we even know each other and recognize each other? And then you may remember, or not, in 1978, Paul McCartney released a song called With a Little Bit of Luck. So, and those of you in the audience who say I wasn't born at that time, please don't say it out loud, if you don't mind. So with a little bit of luck, this will all work out. And I'm a fan of Paul McCartney, and I'm a fan of that song, because I think the lines here are really important, and I love the ones that said, there's no end to what we can do together, there's just no end. And I think when I tell you the stories of where we've been and where we're going, you'll agree with Paul McCartney, even if you weren't born in 1978. There. So this is about connection. And about tipping point for me was a very long time ago. Our sons were diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I felt pretty much alone. I live in Middletown, Ohio. It's a very small community. We were the only family with this diagnosis in that whole community. And it felt really lonely. And I met a few parents along the way, and we were not alone anymore. Donna Sacamano is one of them. She is not here. And then as our little family grew, I met some other people. One of them is the audience in Filippo Bucella in Italy. And so all of a sudden, we had a worldwide community. And then Tally from Israel, and all of you from the United States. And we had a growing, connected community that had one purpose in mind, and that was to look at this disease and try to change the world. So it is about connection, and it is about tipping points. And for me, the tipping point was finding that I was not alone anymore. And so those of you who are new to this community, I hope you feel the same, certainly as you leave Arizona. And for those of you online, you are not alone, and we are together, and there's a lot we can do together to change this world. So it's about care. Those two little boys are mine. They were diagnosed a long time ago, probably before many of you were born. And I'm happy to say now that care has changed dramatically, and the trajectory has changed dramatically. But one thing that I worried about continuously with my boys was the question around, is their heart built to last? If we can and are able to preserve and protect their muscle function for years and years and years, is that heart built to last? So I met another group of people that I've known and loved, Linda Kripe and Kathy Kinnett, at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and I think I might have harassed them if you asked them, to be honest. And I kept asking about the heart as a muscle too, and what are we going to do about it? And I'm happy to say that we're at a tipping point here in heart disease and Duchenne. Because Chet Villa and Deep Nandy from Nationwide, Chet is from Cincinnati Children's, Deep Nandy is from Nationwide Children's Hospital, got together with a network that was established at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati called the Action Network, which is a group of pediatric cardiologists looking at heart failure in children. And they've carved out for us a specific arm of the Action Network to look at heart disease in Duchenne. And so I'm happy to say to you today that those little boys died of heart disease. But now today, PPMD is going to help expand that network with a $2 million grant to expand the network of action, to look at heart disease, to look at early intervention with medicines, to understand what the strain that we see on cardiac MRI and how that relates to ejection fraction in the heart disease that we see, to look at new medicines like Entresto, like finerenone, like medicines that are not commonly used and have not been commonly used. And finally, to think about heart transplant. Not everybody needs a new heart, but when you do, it's nice to be on the policy that says you're able to receive a new heart. So today, we're going to expand that action network with $2 million. We are thrilled. And that's a tipping point, because now heart disease is going to be involved in centers all over the world so that we understand what's going on, can connect the dots, treat the heart, and make it built to last. Care is extraordinarily important. If you were in the Duchenne 101 with Rachel, she talked about care. We've worked hard in the United States to create a certified Duchenne Care Center program. We have about 31 centers, and it's nice to be in those centers. It's interdisciplinary care. It is terrific care. It can give you the confidence that hands and arms are wrapped around you, and you're going to get, for you, if you're a carrier, for your family, for your son, for you as an adult or a young adolescent with Duchenne, the care you need, the discussions you want to have, and the information you're going to need to thrive, as Rachel said earlier, to thrive in this life, which is our goal. Oh, can we back up one? Okay. It's about clinical trials and learning. I don't know about you, but I've heard all of my life clinical trials are experiments, and they are, and this is how we make progress. But it's a commitment on our part to participate in a clinical trial. Sometimes it takes years and years and years, which is a struggle and a long commitment. And sometimes they're put on clinical hold, and that's a struggle, but it's still a commitment. But at the end of the day, because right now we have so many companies involved in so many clinical trials, this is how progress is made. And you're going to have some exciting news, what we call early readouts from 3 companies this week. And it's PTC Therapeutics is going to read out. That means give new data. And Italo-Pharmaco is going to read out. And that means they're going to give data on their clinical trial as well. And Capricor Therapeutics is going to talk about their trial. So we're going to have some breaking news, and breaking news means good news in our case, and I know you're going to be excited to hear. We're going to hear about lots of other trials as well, and we're going to hear from Dr. Michael Binks soon. Pfizer did a clinical trial in domagrozumab, and you know, as all medicine names don't make any sense to any of us. So domagrozumab was an anti-myostatin drug, so it was a drug that was expected to enable muscle to grow bigger and therefore stronger, but the trial did not succeed. And we as a community just fell apart after a long slog through that clinical trial. But we learned a lot, and he's going to talk about learnings. It was emotionally devastating to hear that trial stopped, but at the other hand, if you know and you learn from Michael Binks what that drug and that information contributed to our community, it was a very good step forward at the end of the day. And it was a no, but it allowed other yeses to go forward. So when we think of tipping points in clinical trials, where are we? Tipping points are that we had our first approval in 2016. Pretty amazing. And we have 5 approvals in the United States, which is really amazing for all of us. Another tipping point was 2018 when the first gene therapy study was started. And now gene therapy studies are in many countries around the world, to include the US, by several companies. Those are tipping points. And we're all enthusiastic about what happens next, because these tipping points mean more trials, more opportunities, and hopefully more approvals, and as soon as possible. And it's about research. You're going to hear from Kevin Flanagan today. Kevin was supposed to be here, but unfortunately turned positive, so he's not able to be here. Even though we asked him to wrap himself in plastic and try to come in, he didn't think that was a great idea, and I'm certain his institution didn't. But he's going to talk about a trial that he did on just a few patients, one of those N=few trials. And it was a duplication of exon 2, where through the technology he used, he yanked out that exon. I'm not sure that's scientific terms. But that child that he treated, and he's treated 3, has a lot of dystrophin on board. It's a baby, 6 months old, with a lot of dystrophin, 100%. So that's very exciting. And that says to us, when we were worried and continue to worry about some of the changes we see in clinical trials in gene therapy, where children from 1 to 17, if they have exon deletions in 1 to 17, they're not included in those gene therapy trials. There may be opportunities in that area to do some trials on N=1 or N=few with technology that's growing. And the antisense companies may be looking in this area as well. So maybe not today, but soon. And I do recognize time is the commodity for all of us. But I think listening to Kevin will really raise your hope and your inspiration about the fact that we have opportunities, research, and stuff that can be happening soon. So you're going to hear about that. You're also going to hear about downstream technologies. And we call it downstream. I always think of a fishing, like getting fish in the downstream. But this is cell therapy. This is antifibrotics, anti-inflammatories, HDAC inhibitors. So Janet Woodcock once said, if you can really control the external environment, the downstream, you're going to be able to make a definite change in this disease progression. So make no mistake, that's really important, and we're going to hear more about it. So it is about research. It is about learning. And earlier, Stan Nelson talked about the fact that we still have some questions here. I wish it was all simple, but in some of our crystal ball, there's a little bit of mud and a little bit of murk, and we got to figure it out. But we are, and it holds a great deal of promise for this community. It's about advocacy, and here's a tipping point as well. When we first started up, Lee Sweeney joined us. Lee Sweeney is not here because he just finished his New Directions meeting. And he came to us and said, you know, I'll throw my hat in this ring and I'll work with you, but you're going to have to think about getting NIH money and Department of Defense money and CDC, the Center for Disease Control money. And we were sort of, how do you do all that? How do you make the government give money to research? How do you leverage all that? So on the back of an envelope, we wrote a piece of legislation together with Sharon Hesterly and a number of others in this community called the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act. And it had 3 components to it. One was Centers of Excellence in Research. There are 6 of them. The other was Standards of Care. You heard about that from Rachel, published in Lancet in 2010 and 2018. Center for Disease Control funded that. And then a research plan. So from then until now, that was 2001, when that piece of legislation that we scribbled on the back of an envelope and talked about saw a Senate hearing on it. That piece of legislation has driven about $800 million into the field of research. Better than any fundraiser, better than any magic, only, and for lots of reasons. One, that it was the National Institutes of Health, which is a very respected investor in research. And that was a tipping point for industry partners to say, this is really an important disease, and let us enter the space. So we now have about 43 companies working in this space. So advocacy is a tipping point. And when we think about it, I think in Middletown, Ohio, I wondered who would listen to me? Would anyone care what I had to say? Would they pay attention to Duchenne? I think our collective voice shows the difference. Then they have to. We elect them into office. And everyone can do that. Everyone can call their constituents or call their representatives in the House and the Senate and say, this matters to me. And legislation is so important. We are now involved in what we call PDUFA. So this is the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, because in Washington, D.C., if you don't have an acronym, you can't be there. So the PDUFA laws are being in discussion at this moment. And that's the law that the FDA is guided by. So the other thing we're doing is writing guidance for FDA. We're about to submit the guidance for review to FDA. And that just gives them a landscape analysis of Duchenne so that when they're looking at data, they can understand that in the context of this disease, in the knowledge we have, and hopefully with good data, make those decisions so we can get more and more and more approvals. Because we believe it'll be a combination of therapies that truly stops Duchenne. So it is about advocacy. It is about our voice. It is about opening that door to FDA and having a conversation with them. Because it matters what living with Duchenne looks like. And it matters that they know that so that they can give approvals to the drugs that we need for the children and young adults and adult males that need help. So it is about advocacy, and it is about our voice. Okay, there you go. It's about participation. Now, so this morning, here's a lie. I got up early at 4 a.m. and I ran up Camelback Mountain. Then I ran back down. That's a lie. Well, anyway, I couldn't because it's rattlesnake mating season. Even though they might be otherwise occupied, I might have run into the wrong place, and I really don't like tangling with rattlesnakes. But that said, I do a 5K and a 10K. I won't say run unless you define that term extremely loosely. But I think that's something that we all can do. Run, walk, go outside, take a breath. We can all participate in some way, in the ways that are comfortable for you, in the ways that you feel comfortable about participating. It's about connection to each other. And participation can mean calling up a friend and saying this is a hard day, but don't let the hard days win. Just make sure you participate, because there's lots of ways, lots of opportunities, and I think it really helps us as a community to move forward. Okay, the future of care. So we're in this place now where we have 5 approvals. We are in a place where gene therapy studies are underway. So I think, I'm making a guess now, so the gene therapy companies in the room, please don't think I'm guessing. I think in the US we have probably about 100 children who have participated in a gene therapy study, which is pretty extraordinary if you think about it. So they've had a virus and they have a microdystrophin on board. We have another number of people in this country who are taking advantage of the antisense oligonucleotides, the exon skipping therapies. So we have a growing group of people that have dystrophin expressed. So what does the future of their care look like? What does exercise look like? What does steroids look like? Is it the same dose? Is it different doses? As we see more approvals, do we add those approvals on to get to combination therapies? How do we do that? How do we combine therapies? So we have extraordinary possibilities in this community, and we as a community have to think through how do we add these therapies together? Who gets what therapies? What dose are the therapies we're going to deliver? And how do we make the best system possible to look at the future of care? We have opportunities that are incredible coming up. And this is a community that has a very good, well-informed, and lovely voice to drive it forward. So we have lots of work to do, but we have opportunities that are extraordinary in this disease, and more so than most other rare diseases combined. All right, here's the story. This is my friend Scott Sands. Scott Sands was 48 years old at this time. And Scott Sands, I know as a mom, I always worried, what are my sons going to do when they grow up? Are they going to find someone they care about? Are they going to find a wife, a partner, someone to enjoy their lives with, friends? So on August 2nd, in about 2010, I think it was, Scott Sands, who I know this family and I love them, Scott Sands' parents invited me down to Florida to Scott's birthday. It was August the 2nd. So Scott had met a woman online, and her name was Rebecca, and he wanted to marry her. The parents were crazy with this. So they invited me down for the birthday because they took me aside for 2 hours and explained that I was the person that would go to Scott and Rebecca and say to them, you cannot get married. We can't work this out with all of the things that you know should happen. We can't work it out, not possible, it's not gonna work, and I was the person to deliver the news. So after 2 hours with Nick Sands and his wife Lucy, they lined it up. I had a little cheat sheet that I was going into Scott's room to tell him why none of this could happen. So I went in there and I said to Scott and Rebecca, so I'm here to talk to you. And they just looked at me and I said, none of this can happen. And they just kept looking at me, and I said, you know it won't work, right? And I have my cheat sheet in front of me because your mother and dad gave it to me. And they said, well, here's the deal. We're getting married tomorrow. We'd like you to be in the wedding. And they were holding hands and said, we love each other and this is enough for us. So I was in their wedding. I didn't deliver the message, but love happens all the time, in all places, for our sons, and will happen frequently in the future. So Scott and Rebecca was a love story that I was so happy to be a part of. and it's about hope. I think hope is a funny word because it depends on where we are at the day we have it or we don't. I think it lands at us in different times in different places. I remember every night going to bed when my sons were here and saying, "Stop it here." To whoever I was praying to whoever I was talking to, I just wanted to stop it here. It wasn't possible then. It's coming now. Our prayer will be answered. All right. It's the power of us. We had a meeting about the power of us because this is emotionally hard sometimes for all of us. People grieve differently. People think differently. Men and women grieve differently. We always judge each other most of the time. I think for my husband, I used to yell at him a lot. He was busy. He was in his medical office, and I'd say, "You get to get up and get dressed," and I'm just here trying to figure out what's dinner looking like. So it's hard, but we have some amazing people to talk to us about that. Some of you have met Rachel Callender. She's here and is going to talk to us. I met Rachel some years back at a meeting when I heard her talk, and I was like, "I want you to be with us." So she's here. She's going to talk about language and how that sits on us and the language we use with each other, the language of illness, the language of medicine, the language of research. You know, no one has to say antisense oligonucleotide twice without wanting all of us to say, you know, what's up with that? Or some of the genetic language. And now we're talking about vectors, and we're talking about all of those kinds of things, so it's another new language. So Rachel's going to bring it home and talk about the difference in the language of science, the language of medicine, and the language of illness, and the language of love. And I think that's going to be an amazing talk. We also have Chris Jones. I think some of you know Chris Jones. He's a dear friend I met online when little Mitchell was here on this earth and having heart problems. Another reason to invest in the heart, to make it built to last, as we wish Mitchell's would have been built to last. So Chris is going to talk about hope, where it lands, how it feels, and how for all of us to have hope all of the time, even on hard days. And then we're having Sean Burkall. I haven't met Sean yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Sean and his wife are here. Sean has SMA, a motor neuron disease, and he's married and he has children. And I think they're going to talk about that relationship and maybe how it's stuck together when sometimes our relationships, all of them, get a little rocky and what that looks like. So I think you're going to enjoy Sean and his wife and Chris and Rachel. And then I just wanted to come back to this. It's still about Paul McCartney's song, right? It's about what we can do together. It's about doing exactly as he said. And with a little luck, we can clear it up and we can bring it to a landing. And I think that's what we're going to do. Thank you all for joining us in Arizona. Thank you all online for being with us today and sticking with us. I know in Europe it's probably middle of the night. In the Eastern Seaboard it's 3 hours later, so it's probably dinner time. If you're in Australia, I actually don't even know what time it would be. But I'm really grateful for all of you to be here, and I'm grateful that the family has gathered again. Thank you.